Final item of business is a members' business debate on motion 17959 in the name of James Dornan on easing the burden and pain of miscarriage. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put. Can I ask those members who wish to speak in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now? And I call on James Dornan to open the debate. Mr Dornan, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I'd also like to thank the 21 MSPs who supported my motion, which allowed me to secure today's very important debate. In May of this year, I visited a meeting of the Miscarriage Association at the Victoria Hospital in my constituency, and I'm privileged to welcome a number of their members to the Chamber today. Their devastating loss has moved me to bring this subject to the Parliament, so I'm grateful for the opportunity to do so this evening. Nothing as a parent makes you prouder than seeing your child grow, develop as a person and forming their own family. I'm the dad to 2 sons and a granddad to 2 grandchildren, and this meeting reminded me of the pain you experience when you lose a baby, even 45 years later. And yet, as a dad, I can't even contemplate the pain their mother must have gone through. I'm sure today we will hear brave, personal and painful accounts of baby loss, and although it will be difficult, it will help us start much-needed conversations. Presiding Officer, miscarriage is the most common type of pregnancy loss, affecting around 1 in 4 pregnancies. Most miscarriages happen in the first 3 months of pregnancy, but they can happen up to the 24th week. From the 24th week onwards, pregnancy loss is known as stillbirth. I mentioned that we're joined by members of my local Miscarriage Association, and like others, they offer a wide range of advice services through local support groups, helplines, online support and leaflets. They're always there to assist couples through what is undoubtedly the most difficult time in a couple's lives. They also provide research such as the ALFI-2 trial, which examines the effects of blood-thinning treatment in reducing the risk of miscarrying. The PROMISE trial, highlighting how progesterone in the first trimester of pregnancy does not improve the chances of a successful pregnancy term where there is a history of miscarriage. One further trial is the tablet trial that investigates the role that thyroid antibodies play in unexplained miscarriages. There are many more examples, and I strongly encourage members to contact their local Miscarriage Association for more detail. Presiding Officer, when I met with the local support group, there were a total of 37 miscarriage bereavements at the meeting. That was combined between 8 women and 2 men. Reflecting that for a moment, more than 3 dozen bereavements between 10 people. The group did recognise the lack of support for men and how they have limited opportunities to deal with their feelings, as they are expected to be the strong ones in situations such as this. We discussed the impact on mental health and how the group had to discover the resources and information on mental health support services for themselves. Just consider the feeling of desperation the group feel at their losses and recurrent losses, and how it affects a person from carrying out simple domestic tasks to being able to maintain relationships with friends, family and, of course, partners. Miscarriages can lead to feelings of despair and desperation to continue to try to have that successful pregnancy. And, of course, there are cases where some women self-medicate. This can place a strain on relationships where partners worry about the risks the women are taking with their health, possibly their life, whilst the women are just trying to get through their loss in whatever way they can and get that, and hopefully get that much-wanted pregnancy. One woman later told me that she recognised that her ability to think rationally was impaired, but she was willing to take the risk if it meant falling pregnant. Another woman later shared the traumatic visits to the early pregnancy unit after suffering a miscarriage. At each visit, the couple were in the waiting room, which is right beside where families come out from seeing their scans. As you can imagine, these couples are elated, holding their scan picture, discussing their baby and the future plans. Just think for a moment how incredibly difficult it must be for couples going through the pain of bereavement, having to listen to those excited parents to be, whilst trying to conceal the pain and hurt that they are feeling. So far, I've considered the pain, the trauma and effects on couples' mental health. However, there are 2 further points I wish to raise. Stella Creasy, who was the MP for Walthamstow before the Westminster Parliament dissolved, spoke about how she felt she had no option but to carry on working through 2 miscarriages. The One Show presenter, Alec Jones, spoke in an interview on how she was back on set an hour after a missed miscarriage. A missed miscarriage being where the baby dies, but the physical miscarriage doesn't start straight away. It's a sad indictment of our society that so many women feel pressured to carry on regardless. How many members have had a conversation with a woman they know or their partner that suffered a miscarriage and been told, "I'm so sorry, I can't make the meeting," or "I can't go to work," or "I can't attend the parents' evening because I'm miscarrying"? Not many, I'd guess. Disclosure is difficult, sometimes exceptionally difficult in the workplace. However, New Zealand is offering hope. New Zealand is looking at having 3 days of paid bereavement leave for women and their partners after a miscarriage or a stillbirth. New Zealanders are already entitled to leave after the death of family members or children. However, there are now proposals to introduce 3 days of paid bereavement leave for women and their partners after a miscarriage or a stillbirth. I welcome this move as, in my opinion, anything we can do to try and remove the stigma and taboo around miscarriage should be explored. Of course.
Ian Smith.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I apologise for not being able to stay for the whole debate. I wonder if James Dornan has come across any issues around the burial of babies following miscarriage.
James Dornan.
There was a number of issues around what happens after miscarriage has occurred, and obviously that I would expect would be one of the major ones for parents who have lost a child in that way. I welcome the move to give the 3 days leave in New Zealand, as in my opinion anything we can do to try and remove the stigma and taboo around miscarriage should be explored. Countless women suffer in silence as they don't let their families or friends know until 12 weeks has passed, the implication being that if you miscarry, it's something often best kept to yourself. Presiding Officer, the pain and trauma of a miscarriage runs deep. It's not a short-term trauma. On top of the excellent work and services that the Miscarriage Association and others provide, there is more action that government, the NHS and society can take. Our mental health services can support parents and remove the feeling that you need to carry on regardless of the pain you feel after a miscarriage. Even providing couples with easily accessible information and support would be a huge step forward. The NHS should consider looking at how they can reconfigure their services so expectant parents aren't in the same clinic at the same time as those who are undergoing the pain of having lost a child. The NHS could expand its research into new drugs and procedures so women don't turn to self-medication and risk their health and future fertility by taking foreign drugs. And finally, we need to open up as a society. It is and must be seen as acceptable for couples suffering their bereavement to talk and share their pain. I call on the new Westminster Government, whoever it may be, to change employment law to meet the New Zealand proposals, where bereavement leave is granted at the loss of a child or children through miscarriage or stillbirth. Presiding Officer, people may have just got on with it in the past, but surely we shouldn't just be reliving the past, but creating a better future. That is the way to help the so many unfortunate people who have lost a child due to miscarriage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Dornan. And I call Kenneth Gibson to be followed by Michelle Ballantyne.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I thank by congratulating my colleague James Dornan for bringing this debate to the Chamber and send my warmest sympathy to those who have experienced miscarriage and who have come to listen to the debate today. Miscarriage is something that stays with both a mother and father for the rest of their lives, and when it happens, parents need to be able to grieve for their child together. And I'm sure there are many members in this chamber who have gone through this appalling experience. Grieving is not an easy process, but a necessary one, and acceptance is key. It is difficult to accept that miscarriage has happened with no explanation as to why the mother was unable to carry her baby to full term. Will this happen again? Could this have been prevented? And a million other questions will be racing through the parents' minds. You may or may not have seen a petition started by a couple from North Ayrshire in October who have just suffered their 12th pregnancy loss in 3 years. They say that while always helpful and understanding, NHS Ayrshire staff have been unable to investigate why this keeps happening or how to deal with it afterwards, and this would have to be done via a private clinic, the cost of which can be prohibitive, and certainly is for this couple. While nothing can turn back time, more research into the causes of miscarriage can not only help parents with their grief and manage expectations. The more we know, perhaps the more we can do to prevent miscarriages from happening. Only 2 weeks ago, an extensive annual report was published on births. It zooms in on factors like maternal age, smoking habits, method of delivery, birth weight and so on. Having large data samples is crucial if we're going to look at trends and establish correlations. But when it comes to recording miscarriage, it is almost impossible to paint a picture that accurately reflects what is going on. The Information Services Division collects data on NHS Scotland services. They made the decision to stop publishing data on miscarriage in 2017 because, and I quote, "The data is incomplete and therefore of low clinical value. Accurate assessment of the number of miscarriages that occur is not possible from hospital-based data, as the only miscarriages that require hospital inpatient or day case treatment are recorded. It is possible that some particularly early miscarriages are either managed solely by general practitioners or may not be recognised by the women who, as such, are never referred to hospital. Requests for specific information on this topic will continue to be provided through ISD's Information Request Service. So there we have it. In essence, data would not include an unknown, potentially very large group of women who were treated in outpatient settings at their GP or who didn't seek any medical intervention, including those who don't know that they even suffered a miscarriage. If, for example, ISD were to update this table and see a decline in recent years, they could not in any way say that this is a true decline in miscarriages. Given the fact we know underreporting is a huge issue for miscarriage, it's almost impossible to interpret the numbers with any degree of reliability, and therefore not possible to make assumptions about trends. Whilst having such data could have been hugely helpful when it accurately reflects trends, miscarriage is such a personal issue that it's still important to learn as much as possible from each individual miscarriage in each family and each woman on an individual basis. With individual circumstances being the only source of information to rely on, it's all the more important that access is provided to such information. Presiding Officer, perhaps this could be tied in with similar criteria as we currently have in Scotland for the provision of IVF treatment on the NHS, which is the most progressive in the UK. This may indeed will require additional funding to maternity services across Scotland, and I hope by working with NHS Scotland and charities such as SANS, Cruise Bereavement Care and others, steps can be taken to help families understand better what has happened and what their chances are. And as a society, we need to do more to ensure that people who have miscarriages are understood by their employers and their friends and their neighbours and others in their wider family. It is something that may be difficult to understand, and I think that what James Dornan is trying to bring forward is absolutely essential, and I think will be warmly welcomed by many people across Scotland. And I would like to thank James for actually bringing this, this debate once again to the Chamber. I hope a lot of people are listening, and I think that a lot of people will appreciate James's work on this area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Gibson. And I call Michelle Ballantyne to be followed by Monica Lennon. Miss Ballantyne, please.
Thank you. Miscarriage is an intensely personal experience. There's no right or wrong about how to feel or behave. But it is also an experience that many women and their partners will go through, and the ability to talk openly about your loss and the feelings you're experiencing can make a huge difference. Often that need comes after the loss, when the shock and sorrow starts to pass and the grief, anger and fear sets in. Or it may come later, at the date that the baby would have been due. The advice that is often given, not to tell anybody you are pregnant until the first 12 weeks are past, may seem sensible because more than 80% of miscarriages occur during these early weeks. But that wondrous first trimester, when you can feel physically terrible, and yet you are filled with the bubbling excitement, changes your life. Suddenly you are dreaming and planning this new little person will be like, and you can't resist buying that little pair of booties or that cute bib. So when your joy and hope slips away one day, does the wisdom of not telling anyone lessen the disappointment and empty feelings? Does it stop the awkward looks and pitying glances? For some, maybe. But most of all, it means you have no one to share your grief and worry and fears with. I was just 5 weeks pregnant the first time I miscarried. We hadn't told anyone, so I carried on as normal with the daily routine of work and family pushing my sadness aside. These things happen, I told myself. As a nurse, I knew that around 1 in 8 pregnancies end in miscarriage, so I told myself it was normal. When I fell pregnant again, I didn't worry, but when I sensed something was wrong, I was past that all-important 12 weeks, and we had started to tell people. I was immediately referred for an emergency scan, but despite thinking I was prepared for what was coming, the silence that pervaded the air with the absence of a heartbeat still came as a shock, and I felt my emotions drain away. I became numb and robotic. The admission to hospital for surgery was immediate. I just wanted to be immersed in the cold professionalism of a routine surgery. I didn't want the medical staff to explain the surgery or talk about it to me, because I didn't want to feel the pain that I knew was just beneath the surface. The staff were supportive, and much as I had when I was the carer, avoided those unhelpful platitudes of "you are still young and you can try again." I think I was given a leaflet, but I just wanted to get home. 2 days later, pale and shaky at the school gates, a kind word of concern from another mother who'd seen me in the hospital when visiting her own mother opened the floodgates and shared stories of loss. It seemed we had all kept our experiences and grief to ourselves, and suddenly we were sharing. It was cathartic, and we laughed and cried together. When I returned to work a few days later, It was easier to tell people I had miscarried and to receive their well-meant concern. I became 1 in 100 women when I had a 3rd miscarriage. But despite this, I also became one of the 85% of women that go on to have a healthy baby following miscarriage. The work of organisations such as Tommy, the Miscarriage Association, and of course our NHS for parents who experience miscarriage has, I hope, improved the access to information, support and understanding, whether through counselling or online information. Importantly, there has also been a recognition that the provision of a certificate for a pregnancy that ends before 24 weeks without a living child can be a comfort to parents who want documentation to acknowledge the loss of that child. It is recommended now that all NHS trusts offer this option for parents. Like many other areas of life and death, I hope that miscarriage becomes less of a taboo subject, so that we all feel able to support those who struggle with what can be a very distressing experience. And normally, I would have probably talked about the facts and the research and the medicine. But today, given the title, I felt I had to share some of my personal experience in the hope that other people will do the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I call Monica Lennon to be followed by Fulton McGregor. Ms Lennon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thank you to James Dornan for bringing this very important topic to the Chamber for debate and discussion tonight. And thank you to members who have shared some of their own experiences, and especially to Michelle Ballantyne. I know that can't be easy to do. The motion rightly talks about taboo and the fact that discussions about miscarriage are still very difficult to have, partly because of the pain that individuals experience and the trauma. But it's one of these topics that's tonight from the local Miscarriage Association feel that this is a valuable debate tonight. Because as the motion rightly says, the pain and trauma of miscarriage and baby loss can be truly devastating for women, for their partners and for couples and families. And it is still really difficult to talk about. I haven't experienced it personally myself, so I feel slightly hesitant, because I think a lot of the times when you haven't had the direct experience, you don't want to say the wrong thing. So I'm very grateful to people who have been very brave in revealing their own experiences. And I was reading before the debate tonight about a friend of mine, Sarah Owen. She's the GMB political officer. I'm a member of that trade union, so I'll declare that. But Sarah has written and spoken about her experience of not just 1 but 2 miscarriages. The first happened while she was at work, and she makes the point that for most women, they will miscarry in public. And she makes the point that she's very fortunate to work for a trade union, to work in a supportive environment. But her concern was for women who don't have that support, who are perhaps in insecure work or work in a sexist organisation and don't know what their rights are at work. And the second miscarriage she experienced, she lost twins. And I think Elaine Smith made the point before she had to leave the chamber about burial or cremation, and Sarah talked very movingly about her experience of cremation. And I know that James Dornan has previously asked questions to the Minister about the National Bereavement Care Pathway, so it would be good to maybe get an update on that. Sticking with politics, I thought it was very moving when Councillor Rhiannon Spear from Glasgow City Council opens up about her experience of miscarriage. And as often as we do in 2019, we talk about these things through the medium of social media. And I thought it was very moving that Nicola Sturgeon reached out to Rhiannon on Twitter and basically just said to her, "I know how you're feeling right now." And of course, the First Minister has been open about her experience. So I think these conversations help others who are perhaps unsure to find the right words, the right way to express themselves. And I think, as others have touched on, it's very important to think about the impact on dads, on fathers too. But I'm also mindful about women who are perhaps having to experience this alone, who don't have a partner, and that must be incredibly difficult. I know I'm running out of time, so I just wanted to pick up on James Dornan's point in his motion about health professionals and how some of these difficulties are not always fully recognised by health professionals. So if we can take anything away from tonight, I'm sure when the Minister responds, but we have to make sure that everyone working across the NHS is equipped to support women and families at these difficult times, that we can work together to tackle the taboo and to remove some of the stigma, and just to be compassionate and human, and not to ask people very personal questions about their intentions about starting a family, having children, why they're not drinking, etc. Don't be nosy, but when someone's having a hard time, reach out and be supportive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I call Fluta McGregor, last speaker, Mr McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And like others, I want to thank James Dornan for bringing what is a very, very important issue to the Chamber. And I think, like Monica Lynn did, I want to thank Michelle Ballantyne for her very powerful personal contribution today. I've not prepared anything as such, Presiding Officer, so forgive me if today's presentation is slightly rougher than usual. There was two reasons why I put down to speak in this debate. A bit like Michelle Ballantyne, I wanted to reflect my own experiences of miscarriage from a dad's point of view, and also want to take the opportunity to speak about a fantastic local organisation, Baby Loss Retreat, who have been supporting since becoming the constituency MSP. So I think, as others have said, there is a real taboo around miscarriage, and I can remember quite clearly when it happened to us, because it happened during our election campaign, or my election campaign, I should say, although the experience made it feel like a whole election campaign, of course. And it was one of those things that happened, and we didn't tell anybody about it. We just had to go on with it. There was an election campaign going on. And unlike other people who are in that position, I suppose I had the honour, if you like, of being able to say something when I was successfully elected, and I made my acceptance speech. And as part of thanking everybody else who had helped me in the campaign, I made a reference, but it was still very obscure. And I'm thinking what others have said today about that. Why was that the case? Why was I so obscure? Why wasn't I more open? And family and friends who were there at the count were saying to me after, what did you mean by that? What were you referring to wee stars for? What did you mean? And it was quite, that's when I was able to talk about it. And I says, well, I didn't want to talk about it during the campaign and stuff like that. But this debate today, and I think conversations since, has certainly had me thinking about whether that was the right approach or not. So I think that the issue of it being a taboo subject that you don't talk about is a very, very real one indeed. And I want to put on record my thanks to my partner, Lindsay, who clearly took the brunt of most of that during the election campaign, and we decided to not talk about it. And thankfully it was a successful election campaign. We've went on to have a second child since as well. But I think there is there's definite lessons in there. And when I spoke at the end, and I want to thank Elaine Smith. It is a pity she's away. I'm sure Monica will pass on these remarks, because Elaine was obviously my rival candidate in Coatbridge and Christ, and she ran a very good campaign, a very fair campaign. I think that's what we should all think about. But there's maybe lessons for everybody there in politics, the press and other places, to think you don't actually know what people are experiencing, when they're standing for office and stuff like that. So I think it's a worthwhile lesson for us all. I said as well, Presiding Officer, that I wanted to talk about the charity Baby Loss Retreat, who were founded a few years ago by Brian and Julie Morrison from Coatbridge. They sought my support not long after being elected, and I've been happy to support them since. They are a couple who now go around the country, mainly in the Lanarkshire and Central Scotland area, and talk about their own experiences of baby loss and how it's helped to motivate them to help others. The purpose of their specific charity, or the specific purpose of their charity, is to offer a break to couples who have experienced a child bereavement or a miscarriage, and because they feel that there's a gap in service there. However, of course, the nature of Brian and Julie, they also offer a counselling service, and they also campaign some of the issues we heard about registration of deaths being before 24 weeks. I know that's something that I've written to the Minister about on Baby Loss Retreat's behalf, and I know that there is work going on in that area. They're very clear that it's about choice. It's not about saying that it's mandatory, but about choice, because there'll be some parents who don't want that, and there'll be some who do. So it's about making choices around that. And they also do a bit of work in terms of, as Elaine Smith and Monica Lane mentioned, in issues around burial and things like that, because there is issues there. So that's all stuff that they also campaign on. I think that they do a fantastic job. At the evening times, Glasgow Champions, Community Champions event, just I think Friday just passed there, they were awarded a health and wellbeing award for their work. So that shows you the amount of recognition they're getting. And maybe it might be, if there's not already, the people that are in the chamber from James Dornan's constituency today, it would be good if me and James could work to link Baby Loss Retreat and his constituents up as well, so that they can share good practice moving forward. So I just want to end, Presiding Officer, by thanking James Dornan again for giving us the opportunity to talk about this, for giving me the opportunity to bring this to the Chamber. I didn't think I'd ever been in a position to speak about it this openly, and I'm glad that I have been. But what I would say is that it maybe ask the Minister, amongst the other things he's been asked as well, is to think about the Scottish Government bringing this debate about. If we're about breaking down the taboo of this, then it shouldn't be down to a members' debate, whereas I think we can see numbers are very limited. Let's get a Scottish Government debate on it, and let's, you know, because I think it'll be a fairly consensual debate, and let's start breaking down the taboo of this subject. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I call on Joe Fitzpatrick to close the Government. Minister, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and thanks to James Dornan for bringing this motion to the Parliament, and for those members who signed the motion to make sure it could secure time in the Chamber tonight. Thanks also to members across the Chamber for their contributions, and particularly to Fulton McGregor and Michelle Ballantyne for sharing, I think for the first time certainly in this Chamber, your personal experiences, and that is so powerful in a particular debate like this. So thank you so much for that. It is important that we work to reduce the stigma and taboo around this subject, and I think you've both and others who've done this in the past helped in breaking down that taboo, so thank you. The loss of a baby, no matter what stage of pregnancy, is a significant and traumatic event that affects many women and their families throughout Scotland. For various reasons, some of those women and families choose to remain silent about what has happened to them. These women and families deserve to be treated with compassion and understanding, and to be given the time and space to grieve for their loss. Miscarriage affects around 1 in 5 women before the 12th week of pregnancy, and there is often no obvious cause. Recurrent miscarriage is less common, affecting, I think as Michelle Ballantyne said, roughly 1 in every 100 women. The chances of finding a treatable cause for recurrent miscarriage are better, but the cause may still not be identified in many cases. It's vital that women and their families who have experienced a miscarriage are provided with the right information, care and support, taking into account their individual circumstances. We expect healthcare professionals to follow the guidelines set out by the Royal College and the NICE clinical guidelines, and treat all women experiencing early pregnancy complications with dignity, sensitivity and respect, and to be aware that people react to complications or the loss of a pregnancy in different ways. We're aware, however, that sometimes care can be variable, particularly for women who do not present at an early pregnancy unit and for women who present out of hours. And my officials have written to health boards to ask what their pathways of treatment and care are for women who have suffered a miscarriage. All bereaved parents should receive high quality, sensitive bereavement care following a loss. This care may include further investigation or counselling as appropriate, and should be provided in the first instance by health professionals in their local area. Additionally, a patient may be referred to an appropriate voluntary organisation such as the Scottish Care and Information on Miscarriage, who offer counselling and advice to women and their partners following early pregnancy loss. And SANS Lothian also offer care and support to women and families for all types of pregnancy and baby loss. And I visited their offices during Baby Loss Awareness Week in October to hear about the important work that they do and to talk to members of the charity and bereaved parents. I'm also really pleased to let members know about an event which will be running for patients in Edinburgh in May this year, when Michael Rimmer, who is a PhD student at the Centre for Reproductive Health at the University of Edinburgh, as well as a junior registrar in obstetrics and gynaecology at NHS Lothian, is running a public engagement event on miscarriage. Michael wants to challenge the taboo that we've talked about around miscarriage by encouraging communication and displaying information from scientific literature, making it accessible to patients, and has secured funding through an award from the Beltane Trust. Kenneth Gibson talked about grieving, and it is important that we have consistently good, high quality and sensitive bereavement care. Scottish Government provided £94,000 to SANS UK, the stillborn and neonatal death charity, to develop a national bereavement care pathway for baby loss in Scotland, as mentioned by Monica Lennon. SANS UK is leading the development of the pathway on behalf of baby loss charities, the Royal Colleges and other professional bodies, along with the Scottish Government. There are 5 experiences of pregnancy and baby loss included in the pathways. They are miscarriage, ectopic and molar pregnancy, termination of pregnancy for fetal anomaly, stillbirth, neonatal death and sudden unexpected death of an infant. The pathways will improve the quality of and reduce the inequity in bereavement care provided to parents and families when a baby dies before, during or shortly after birth, building on good practice already in place across health boards in Scotland. All health boards were invited to consider whether they would like to become pathway early adopter sites, and we've now identified 5 health boards: Ayrshire and Arran, Fife, Dumfries and Galloway, Grampian and Lothians, who will take this work forward early next year. And I'm really pleased to let members know that I expect to be launching the pathways in the spring of next year. So hopefully that is something that Monica Lennon and others will look forward to. We've also set up a working group chaired jointly by the Royal College of Midwives and the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists to look at the possibility of providing a non-statutory voluntary certificate for loss occurring before the 24 weeks of pregnancy, an issue raised by, I think, Michelle Ballantyne and Fulton McGregor. We know that mental health during pregnancy and after birth is also hugely important. That's why the Government has committed £50 million over the next 4 years to improving mental health services for women and their families during this period. Miscarriage, pregnancy, complications and loss can be devastating for families. There can be so many additional challenges around mental health following these traumatic experiences, and it's key that women who experience loss and trauma receive the right mental health support if needed, and that support is ongoing and available during future pregnancies. Presiding Officer, I want to conclude again by thanking James Dornan and for others for contributing in the debate today and bringing the motion to the attention of their chamber. To really particularly again thank Michelle Ballantyne and Fulton McGregor for your contributions. I think this has been a good debate. I think maybe Fulton's right. Obviously, the decision of what business comes to the chamber is one for the Parliamentary Bureau, but I think having a longer, more substantive debate might be a good thing. There might not be as many people in the chamber today as we would hope, but obviously all of the voices that have spoken today are recorded in the official report and will be heard on the Parliament TV. So I think that is really important. I hope I've reassured the Parliament that the Scottish Government is firmly committed to helping to ease the pain and burden felt by women and their families who have sadly experienced a loss. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the debate and I close this meeting of Parliament.